Okay, great. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Maya. I've been part of Japanese Canadians for Social Justice since 2020. So it was right before the pandemic, and I was invited to a meeting in person. And I just remember going on a Saturday morning to this church near downtown Toronto and just like sitting around this table with a bunch of other Japanese Canadians and eating Japanese snacks. And it just felt like a really nice sense of community. Unfortunately, after that, that was when everything locked down. So we weren't active for a few months and everything moved online. But since then, we've been pretty consistent with meeting once a month online. And so we're really excited for you all to join us today and to share what we've been up to. So before we begin fully, I just wanted to talk more about what JCSJ's mission statement is and how it relates to our work. So JCSJ's mission statement, our mandate is to support the struggle for justice, not just for Japanese Canadians, but for all who suffer and call our name. And so this is really important to all of us because we don't only focus on issues that affect us directly as Japanese Canadians, but we recognize our need to stand in solidarity and the interconnectedness of shared struggle. And for anyone else who's struggling, for us to always just be there and support, as long as it supports our own mandate. And although we're called Japanese Canadians for Social Justice, we're more so a more accurate name would be Japanese Canadians in Southern Ontario for Social Justice, because most of us are in Toronto. And so that means that most of our work takes place on land that's governed by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty. And this is an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe people to care for and share the land around the Great Lakes peacefully. And so this is a reciprocal treaty that recognizes the relationships between different groups of people and the need to always be reciprocal in our relationships. And so I encourage you all to also think about how this reflects in our work and in our identities, and to support Indigenous struggle for reconciliation and for land rights and treaty rights and everything else that comes with Indigenous struggle on Turtle Island. And so we acknowledge that we are learning, growing, and organizing on land stolen as part of an ongoing project of genocide and colonialism against Indigenous peoples. And so I'm looking forward to showing some of the causes that we've supported in the past and hope to continue in the future. But before we begin fully into our presentation, where is she? Susan has written a beautifully worded note about Joy, who is pretty much the reason that we're all here today. So I'm going to pass it on to Susan to just give her a little speech.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Susan Aihoshi, and I am a proud member of Japanese Canadians for Social Justice. This evening, we are celebrating the 7th anniversary of our group's existence and honoring our remarkable founder, Joy Kogawa. Not only was Joy a key figure in the 1988 historic redress movement, but she became and continues to be an outspoken voice against social injustice here in Canada and elsewhere. Indeed, as you will hear later, this group exists today because Joy was able to gather like-minded people from disparate backgrounds to rally in support of former MPP Sue Wong's controversial private members' motion to officially commemorate the Nanjing massacre in the Ontario legislature. I first met Joy at a literary conference at U of T in November 2018, where she spoke unusually and eloquently about social justice, not literature. Before I knew it, she had asked me to join her and some friends at Queen's Park on December the 13th, 2018, for the first official Nanjing massacre commemoration being held there. What a remarkable day that was. I met several of Joy's friends and colleagues, whom I later came to know as JCSJ members. And by early 2019, I found myself regularly attending JCSJ meetings. Those of you who know Joy know what a driving force she can be. She is both eloquent and persuasive. I found myself drawn to the causes she cares about because they are ones that I care about as well. Thank you, Joy, for creating this small group of Japanese Canadians who work collaboratively to support important social justice causes. One of Joy's favorite reminders to us at JCSJ over the years is this quotation from the anthropologist Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So Joy, along with others this evening, will be available to answer questions at the end of this presentation. And now I'll turn this over to, I believe, is it Ren? Are you speaking next? Thanks.
Yes, I think so. Thanks, Susan. So I'm just going to very briefly go over some of basically the beginnings of JCSJ. And for the sake of time, I can't get into too much detail, but I hope I'll cover the important points, and then I'll hand it off to Maya, who will take us through some of this group's more recent history. And in case you didn't know, and as Susan has just mentioned, JCSJ didn't actually start as JCSJ. In the beginning, this was a coalition called Japanese Canadians for Bill 79. And we were a coalition that was organizing to support a provincial bill in Ontario to commemorate the Nanjing Massacre. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the Nanjing Massacre was one of the more notorious atrocities committed by Imperial Japan in the lead up to what is known in the West as the Second World War. And it's an atrocity that has been repeatedly denied by Japanese governments and Japanese nationalists as part of a larger project of historical revision that basically is trying to erase Japanese responsibility for colonialism in Asia. So it's it continues to be sort of a live and contentious issue. And the reason why we as a group started organizing together as Japanese Canadians was because we became aware that other Japanese Canadians were actively opposing this bill to commemorate the Nanjing Massacre. And in particular, one of those groups was the National Association of Japanese Canadians, which is a representative organization. It's made up of local groups and chapters, and it sort of made its name leading the redress movement for Japanese Canadians who were interned during the Second World War. And the NAJC claims to be on their website, the only national organization in Canada that represents the JC community. And they describe their primary focus as human rights and community development. And this NAJC wrote to the Premier of Ontario against Bill 79, claiming that commemorating the massacre was basically, for a number of different reasons, against the interests of the so-called Japanese Canadian community. And so as Japanese Canadians, we fundamentally disagreed with the NAJC's position. And we felt that it was our responsibility to support other communities in their calls for justice, even and especially when those calls for justice implicated us in some way. And so we began to gather, often at Joy's place. We mobilized support both locally and also across the country. We circulated a letter that gained a good number of signatories from across the country. And that letter, I hope it's okay to just throw the link for the letter in the chat. That letter was addressed to the NAJC. Okay, if I can pull the chat up. There we go. That letter was addressed to the NAJC, calling on them to withdraw their opposition to the bill. And we engaged in other ways, trying to get the NAJC to take back its position. And when those efforts failed, we then began to meet with the Premier directly and also to join this broader coalition that was supporting Bill 79. And in the end, the Ontario legislature unanimously passed a motion to commemorate the Nanjing massacre. And in the aftermath of that, the group renamed ourselves as Japanese Canadians for Social Justice in order to continue struggling for justice together in our world. And so I can go into a lot more detail about how all of this happened and why and what the dynamics were within our Japanese Canadian communities. But I think the important thing for me to note, especially with respect to our group, is this basically, that JCSJ started out of a conviction that being Japanese Canadian isn't just about culture or ethnicity. It really is about how we are implicated in a world of injustice and what we do and what we say about it in response. And what that means is that as Japanese Canadians, we each have a responsibility first to sort of to figure out or discern what our stakes are in the violence and in the exploitation that's happening around us by examining our personal and collective histories and the ways that those histories shape our lives in the present. And secondly, to then act in response by joining in broader struggles for justice from our own particular standpoints as and starting points as Japanese Canadians. And I think for me and for others in this group, this is a personal responsibility. There's a dimension of this that's deeply personal and that we really do have to figure out for ourselves. And so we can't just rely on organizations or these sort of ideas of identity, these monolithic ideas to kind of figure these questions out for us and fight the fight on our behalf. We really saw that with how the NAJC responded to Bill 79, that there was a part of this fight that we had to take into our own hands. But also, I think we all recognize that this responsibility that we have as Japanese Canadians is one that we take up collectively because we are fighting against systems that are trying to tear us apart and turn us against one another. And so we know the power of fighting those systems together in collective. And we know that the justice that we're ultimately all fighting for is a collective one. So yeah, so in a nutshell, that's sort of where and how JCSJ started, out of this shared conviction, I think, that we had that being Japanese Canadian meant that we had particular stakes in the struggle for justice in our world, and that there was power in joining in the struggle together as Japanese Canadians. Yeah, so that's sort of where we started, and I'll hand it off to Maya to talk about some of the work that the group has done.
Great, thank you, Nin. I just wanted to say that before I go into the events, we also have a couple solidarity messages, and we also have our keynote speaker and another speaker from our group. So at the very end, we're going to be having a discussion and Q&A session, so you can ask any questions you have at the end of our webinar, and we're also going to hopefully talk more about what other efforts we can support, whether they're new efforts or whether we should contribute the efforts that we're already continuing. So, continue with the events that we're already contributing to. So I'm going to share my screen here because we have lots of photos from past events. So as you can imagine, we've been around for 7 years, so I won't get into every single event, but we've identified a few key themes that we've focused on throughout the years. One of them is mental health, and so this one was called We Should Know Each Other, and just destigmatizing the conversation around mental health. And you can see some of the speakers in this image. We also had a redress event in which Joy spoke, and this is Ed Broadbent. He recently passed away, so we included this image of Joy with Ed Broadbent, who was a supporter for the redress movement for the Japanese Canadians. One of our biggest campaigns during the first year of COVID actually, was a Justice for Pato event, and it was tied to the general struggle for migrant injustice and imperialism, Japanese imperialism specifically. And so we had webinars, we had press conferences, we had rallies, a letter writing campaign. And so we got really creative with how we supported this and supported Pato-chan in her time in the Japanese detention facilities. And now she's out of there, thankfully. But at the time, she was going through some really horrible conditions in the detention facility. So we came together with other groups, some of which we have the solidarity messages from today, and worked together to rally for her in support. Here's some pictures of that in-person rally. We also did some film screenings. So one of them was Okinawa, the Afterburn. The other one was Tokyo Trial. Sorry, a little bit of a lag with my computer. This is Shusenjo, which is about comfort women and Japan's war on history. And so we got the director of this movie to come in and speak to the issues more. And we had lots of Korean Canadian and Korean American audience members as well. And there was a great discussion to just talk more about this issue because it is an ongoing issue of erasure from the part of the Japanese government. Here's a rally from war against Iran. I believe that was 2018 or 2019. This is a more recent one on Hiroshima Nagasaki Day that was organized to speak more to anti-imperialism from Japan, not just the government, but from Japanese companies as well. And so we did a rally, and then we had we joined the celebration that occurs every year for Hiroshima Nagasaki Day. I also mentioned some Indigenous struggles, and so we've been to some rallies as well. This one was Grassy Narrows. So these are some rallies that were held in Queen's Park in Toronto. And just generally just supporting Indigenous resistance to mining and to imperialism, not just in Canada, but globally as well. Sorry, just taking a moment with the slides here. For example, this rally on the left-hand side, there were land defenders from Wet'suwet'en in BC, Canada, and also from Indigenous communities in Mexico. And so there was this tide struggle against Canadian companies and mining on Indigenous territory without consent. And just, again, acknowledging the shared struggle between all of these communities. We've also supported multiple housing issues. This is specifically in Toronto, but we also did a webinar in, I believe it was 2022. And so we got a couple of activists to join us in this webinar. And we've been attending the National Housing Day rallies that happen every year. So here are a couple more photos from them. I believe this was from the anti-Asian hate rally that happened in 2021 or 2022. And just some group photos of us at our in-person social and some online gatherings as well. Just kind of nice to reflect on how far we've come since then. This is one of the original photos with many of the members that are here tonight. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to stop screen sharing now. And I'm going to pass it on to Kim, who's going to be showing some of his photos from recent Palestine events he's attended.
Can you see that? Okay. So we have a lot of photos from the Palestine events. And we separated these because there were a lot of photos, and because this is such a, it's such a large ongoing campaign. There's really been nothing like this. In Toronto, there have been demonstrations or other events at least once a week for the last 3 months. So that's why there are so many photos. And we've had members from JCSJ at these events, at the majority of them. This is a photo of the one of the groups. One of the things that's been nice about these demonstrations is that there's been a lot of groups that have joined in. This is a queer and trans group. There's a Bosnian group that we've seen a couple times. Tamils. This photo here is of one of the rallies and marches that happened in Mississauga. And this is probably one of the largest, if not the largest, demonstration that's ever been held in downtown Mississauga. Some more from downtown Toronto. This was a vigil, which happened at night at the end of October. And this is Yonge and Bloor. There were a few early demonstrations that took over the intersection of Yonge and Bloor, and that's probably happening again right now. There's a demonstration taking place as we speak. One of the queer groups. And this is a group of women who produce signs that are calling out politicians and media for misinformation and disinformation about Palestine. And this is a recent demonstration that is actually after an action that they did in Eden Center. They did a surprise demonstration inside at Christmas time, singing songs, and then led the demonstration out to Dundas Square. And I think just the last thing to say is one thing. This is one of the campaigns that, as I say, it's ongoing. So we're going to be continuing to be there, and we encourage everyone who's watching, listening, to get out to these demonstrations if you can. Okay, thanks. And back to Maya.
Great, thanks, Kim. So I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker, Jane Komori. I'm just going to read her bio here. Jane Komori is a postdoctoral fellow in the History Department at the University of British Columbia. Her research theorizes the settler ecology of Western Canada as a complex of extractive and agricultural industries driven by the recruitment of Japanese, Chinese, South Asian, and Indigenous workers from the 1850s through the Second World War. Jane is also a labor organizer who has worked with graduate student unions and other organizations in Canada and the United States. And it's not in her bio, but she's also one of the co-authors of Our Edible Roots, the Japanese Canadian Kitchen Garden. And it's on like the top of my to read list. So I'm just really happy to have you here today. And I'll pass the mic to you.
Really sweet. Thank you so much, Maya. And yeah, thank you to the organizers for putting this together and for inviting me, and to all of you for all of your really important work. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Okay. Yeah, so I'm really honored and delighted to celebrate this anniversary with all of you. And I'm just really humbled to have the opportunity to share some of my own thoughts about Japanese Canadian history and politics. And I'll sort of try throughout to relate them to your past and present organizing work, which I'm really moved and inspired by. I'm so happy I got to see all those pictures from your events. Yeah, it's just such important work. So I think one of the reasons that I was invited to speak was because some of my own writing about the controversy surrounding the calls for a commemorative day for the Nanjing massacre with the series of events, which, as I understand it from Ren's comments, was sort of sparked the formation of Japanese Canadians for social justice. And my own motivation for researching and writing about the issue really came from my feeling of dismay, maybe even shame at the National Association of Japanese Canadians opposition to the commemorative day. And this is a feeling that perhaps all of you are familiar with. But at the same time, I also felt really deep confusion, mainly because the statements that the NAJC released about the issue, I just couldn't make heads or tails of their logic and how it was that they could sort of claim injury and even the suggestion of a commemorative day for the Nanjing massacre. So I started to, being a researcher, I started to dig into it by examining the longer history of the NAJC, as well as the way that it's kind of structured today. And one conclusion that I arrived at was that the NAJC's opposition to the commemorative day was partly rooted in the limitations of the politics of redress that the organization has promoted since inception. And let me try and kind of explain what I mean. I'm happy to talk more about it later if there's time. But while reading about the history of the NAJC, I came across Roy Mickey's critique of the redress campaign's strategic decision to frame the harms of Japanese Canadian mass incarceration really around the violation of civil liberties. That is, that mass incarceration was a legal injustice done to Canadian citizens who should have been treated just like any other Canadian citizen. And while Mickey does not reject the truth of that claim, and nor do I share Mickey's concern about this kind of narrow framing of what the injustice of mass incarceration was, and with redress as its sort of only solution. Following Mickey, I argue in my writing that in order to foreground the Canadianness of the Japanese Canadian community, the NAJC had to disavow its complex and actually really transnational or international composition. And then once redress was won, the NAJC positioned itself as an authority on issues of Canadian race relations, to use a term that they often use, which it cast in the liberal language of inclusion, equality, recognition, and so on and so forth. However, there's a contradiction inherent to the NAJC with regards to its self-representation as a Canadian organization, because when we examine their contemporary organizational structure, we're actually really quickly confronted by its material and ideological entanglement with the Japan Foundation and with other agencies of the government of Japan. It then becomes evident that the NAJC's activities are really influenced by Japanese politics, which have in recent decades become increasingly right-wing. The Japanese political establishment's swing to the right is really manifest in its historical revisionism and denial of historical injustices perpetrated by the Japanese imperial government and army, a position which, as you all know, the NAJC has unfortunately adopted for itself. So in summary, I tried to critique what I saw as the NAJC's nationalist structure on the one hand, this sort of assertion of a proper Canadian identity, to borrow Roy Mickey's phrasing again. And then on the other hand, the NAJC's sort of disavowal of its transnationalism. That is, its disavowal, or kind of its denial of its really serious attachments to the Japanese government in terms of funding, in terms of communication, so on and so forth. So I argued that this contradiction led to the really confusing statements that the NAJC made in opposition to the Nanjing Massacre Commemorative Day, which those statements, which at once sought to position Japanese Canadians as kind of more legitimately Canadian than other groups like Chinese Canadians, but also wanted to position Japanese Canadians as being under threat by any recognition of past wrongs committed by the Japanese Imperial Army. But really the sort of political upshot, or the takeaway for me, is that this contradiction inherent to the NAJC's contemporary structure really puts up barriers to solidarities between Japanese Canadians and other racialized communities. And while the issue has receded, at least for the moment, from the focus of both the NAJC and other Asian Canadian groups, I think it still remains really relevant to us today. The controversy was, of course, the impetus for a number of ad hoc groupings of left and progressive Japanese Canadians who opposed the NAJC's position on the issue. Japanese Canadians for Social Justice being one example. But I think these emergent formations of Nikkei and Japanese Canadian organizing really reflect the fact that the pressing political concerns of our moment have shifted pretty dramatically from the ones that produced the NAJC in the mid to late 20th century. So for Yonsei Japanese Canadians like myself, in our lifetime, concerns about mass incarceration have turned in the wider North American context to the growing and disproportionate numbers of Black, Latinx, and Indigenous populations behind bars on both sides of the Canada-US border. Other struggles for reparations and redress, particularly for Black people in the United States and for Indigenous folks in Canada, have felt often to me more urgent than the NAJC's recent campaign for BC redress. And for so many of us, the epochal or kind of defining questions of our time have to do with the relationship between colonialism, imperialism, and the destruction of our shared environment. In other words, all of us, Japanese Canadians, are confronted with the problem of how to interpret and respond to our unique history and what to do with it in the present. Some of us take an increasingly conservative, kind of inward-looking and defensive position. That's how I would describe the NAJC's position. But many of us today seek to pivot from liberal goals to do with inclusion or civil rights or quote unquote race relations towards a more radical, anti-colonial and international politics. In other words, where the NAJC seeks to kind of retain this contradictory attachment to Canadian citizenship on the one hand and conservative Japanese politics on the other, I think those of us in this room want to interpret Japanese Canadian history differently, and we want it to guide us towards different political ends. The kind of organizing that Japanese Canadians for Social Justice and other progressive Nikkei want to do is not without precedent, though. And historically, there have been alternatives to the conservative model that the NAJC holds out today. Pre-incarcerations or pre-World War II organizations like the Japanese Camp and Mill Workers Union sought to promote leftist politics throughout the Nikkei community. And crucially, in the union struggle with white employers on the one hand and Japanese contract bosses on the other, the union fought both Canadian racism and white supremacy, while also pushing back on the influence of Japanese imperialist politics within the Issei. And it sought to end the coercive role that the Japanese consulate played in kind of determining Japanese Canadian politics and in suppressing Japanese worker organizing. Another example is one that has already come up, but later in the 20th century, Japanese Canadians were joined by a multiracial coalition in the campaign for the redress agreement. We had the support of Korean Canadians and other Asian Canadian groups, other racialized communities in our struggle. So in summary, I'm almost finished. I think the most exciting organizing in Nikkei communities right now, what really inspires me, is organizing that kind of recalls these alternatives to the NAJC, that looks really seriously at the lingering impacts of Japanese imperialism, that has a rigorous and internationally oriented critique of capitalism, and that seeks to build interracial coalitions and solidarities. I see this kind of organizing work taking place today in Japanese Canadians for Social Justice. I've been so excited by the strong stance that you've all taken in support of Palestinian liberation in particular, but also in other groups like the Nikkei Decolonization Tour, which is based in the US and which actively cultivates connections between leftist groups in Japan that that are sort of shedding light on the country's imperialist history. I'm also thinking here of organizations like Nikkei Resistors, which is based in the San Francisco Bay Area, which makes the relationship between Japanese American incarceration and contemporary US migration policy, particularly migrant detention, really clear in the work that they do. So again, I'm inspired by this kind of work, not just because it provides a necessary counter to the conservative impulses of organizations like the NAJC, but because it draws on our history and our experience as Nikkei in order to actually fuel solidaristic struggles for justice, both within and beyond Canada or North America today. So thank you all for the work that all of you do. And I really look forward to standing alongside you in whatever comes next. Thanks.
Wow, thank you so much, Jane. I'm really looking forward to our discussion later, and I hope that some of you will ask more questions and that we'll have a more nuanced discussion about everything you just said. So next, I'm going to pass it on to Kim to show some solidarity messages that we've received.
Thanks, Maya. So the first two solidarity messages we have are from organizations that JCSJ has worked with on housing issues. And the first one is from Gaetan Uru of 230 Fight Back.
Yes, hi. My name is Gaetan. I'm from 230 Fight Back. I'm here today being recorded and going to want to say thank you so much for your support over the last year. The Japanese Canadian for Social Justice was one of the first group to actually give us some funds to get going. When we started last fall, we had no money. We needed to do a lot. And since that year, your support has been really really valuable in terms of not only the funds, but also in terms of participating in some of the call outs of writing a letter to the city, for instance, in terms of getting them to buy the properties. Also, there's a wonderful picture of the Japanese Canadian for Social Justice that I found just yesterday when you were at the march on June 10th in front of the 214, 230, which is the building that we were fighting for. And just a quick update, we had some really interesting news that we got on December 6th that the Kingset Capital was offering to sell the properties to the city, which was our main demand. And now the fight continues as we have to get the city to fight back. So that's a really big development. And so I just want to say, yeah, thank you so much for all your support. And looking forward to working with you in 2024 and getting your support. Thanks.
Okay, and we have one more video. And this one is from Greg Cook of Shelter and Housing Justice Network.
Hello, my name is Greg Cook. I'm on the steering committee of Shelter and Housing Justice Network. I'm a longtime outreach worker in Toronto with people who are unhoused. And I'd like to take this opportunity to express appreciation and a lot of respect for the work that that Japanese Canadians for Social Justice has done over the years. I mainly know them through Danielle, and I've respected Danielle's work for a long, long time. And I'd say that what I really admire about them is the broad range of groups and important issues that they show up for, whether that's at protests, whether that's agitating through deputations or letters. Yeah, I just really respect their work. I think of the work that they've done, I know on behalf of Indigenous communities like Grassy Narrows, um, around protesting around Free Palestine, and as well as for people in the encampments around when they're being evicted, for unhoused people in shelters, anti-gentrification work like 230 Fight Back. Um, I've read and seen some of their work with signing on to open letters that SHJN has done, which we really appreciate, as well as giving deputations at the Economic and Community Development Committee around making sure that people have warm and safe spaces inside that aren't congregate. And finally, we really appreciated that they joined us for the National Housing Day rally that SHJN put on. So yeah, best of luck going forward, and really appreciate all the work that Japanese Canadians for social justice have done over the years. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now I think we're passing on to Kota.
Yep, that's right. Thanks, Kim. So I'm just going to read Kota's bio. Kota Kimura is an activist, writer, and the host of Against Japanism podcast based in Toronto. Since he was politicized at the tail end of the anti-globalization movement in the mid-2000s, Kota has been active in various social and environmental justice movements, such as climate justice, anti-police violence, and Palestine solidarity. He's currently a member of 2 community-based organizations in Toronto, Japanese Canadians for Social Justice and Canada-Philippine Solidarity Organization, organizing with progressive members of Japanese and Nikkei communities, as well as in solidarity with the National Democratic Movement in the Philippines, an unfinished people's revolution led by the workers and peasants. When he is not podcasting, writing his book, and organizing in solidarity with liberation movements around the world, he works as a freelance Japanese language teacher. And so we're excited for his his report back from the conference that he attended back in October. Go ahead, Kota.
Thank you, Maya. Hello, I'm Kota. I'm a member of JCSJ as well as CPSO, Canada Philippine Solidarity Organization, as Maya introduced me as. So I'm gonna be doing a report back from this conference. I went in October, all the way in Amsterdam, Netherlands, and initially I was like, "Oh, I'm dead broke. I have no. I really want to go to this conference, but I have no money to go." And then I brought it up with my comrades at JCSJ, and they're like, "Oh, like yeah, like well maybe we can fund you to go." It's like, "Oh," and yeah, we had a kind of discussion about it, and yeah, with the group's support, I was able to go. So thank you to JCSJ, and I was also honored to represent JCSJ there as well. This conference was hosted by the National Democratic Front of the Philippines, aka NDFP. And I want to tell you a little about what the NDFP is. The National Democratic Front of the Philippines is the revolutionary United Front organization of the Filipino people fighting for national freedom and for the democratic rights of the people. The NDFP seeks to develop and coordinate all progressive classes, sectors, and forces in the Filipino people's struggle to end the role of U.S. imperialism and its local allies of big landlords and compradors, and attain national and social liberation. Um, it is an alliance of various revolutionary mass organizations, including the New People's Army, which is a guerrilla army waging the armed struggle against the reactionary Philippine state, Marcos regime, as well as the Communist Party of the Philippines. So the logo here, NDFP's logo here, represents a triangle, which is in turn sort of a triad of 3 main revolutionary organizations within the NDFP, which is the CPP here and MPA here. the Philippine government listed the NDFP as a quote unquote terrorist organization in 2021. And while the NDFP supports the People's War, a revolutionary armed struggle against the US-backed Marcos regime, it has also engaged in peace talks with the Philippine government to address the root cause of the armed conflict and for just and lasting peace in the Philippines. And the NDFB's international department is based in Utrecht, Netherlands. It was founded by some of the leaders, OGs of the National Democratic Movement who took exile in Netherlands. And yeah, so even though it's it's seen as a terrorist organization by the Philippine state, they have a protected they have they can operate safely there. And yeah, their basically job is to promote promote anti-imperialism and build solidarity with other revolutionary organizations from around the world. So this was sorry, I forgot to mention the name of the conference. It's called Theoretical Conference on Imperialism and War. So theoretical being it's a conference focused on theory, and its attendance included 139 delegates from various proletarian socialist and anti-imperialist and democratic parties representing countries such as Belgium, Canada, China, Germany, the UK, India, Italy, Turkey, Kurdistan, the Netherlands, North Korea, Philippines, Russia, South Korea, and the US. And most of the participants are organizations, but we also had an individual, Fred Angst, who's an independent scholar from China. He's a very interesting figure. His mother is Joan Hinton, who was a nuclear physicist involved in the Manhattan Project. But after she found out her research was used in the development of the A bomb, the bomb, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, she left, in dismay, and she decided to move to China and get involved with supporting the revolutionary movement, Chinese Revolution there. And so basically, Fred grew up in China, and he's a white guy, but he has like a Chinese accent, um, and he's seen it all. Like he was supportive of the revolution, but he also saw China transform from socialist society to like the capitalism being restored, and now it's become a superpower. So he provided a sort of critical perspective on China from some as someone who lives there and grew up there. Um, it was exciting, but I was also somewhat disappointed too. There was no organizations from Japan, and also like there are a lot of like European organizations, but there's no one from France, which is unfortunate because France has a lot of like a lot of class struggles and intense militant mass movement has happening, like a yellow vest and also like anti-police uprisings. So it was somewhat unfortunate to see no one from that country. But regardless, the conference was very interesting. Oh, by the way, this is the program of the conference, and it's 2 days, and basically the representatives of these various organizations from these countries, presented their speeches, and yeah, so this is the yeah. I'm not going to list all the organizations because there's a lot, but yeah, it was interesting. But so two main organizations that opened the conference was the two communist parties, which is the Communist Party of the Philippines, and the other one is Communist Party of India, Maoist. So these are two communist parties that are waging revolutionary people's war in India and the Philippines right now. So they're sort of somewhat of the vanguard of the war revolution, so to speak, today. Their keynote speeches are titled the first one by CPP was titled "Wage Revolutionary Wars to Fight Imperialist War," and the second one by CPI Maoist is called Imperialist War Revolution. So CPP opened the conference by proposing the conference focus on the three key questions. One is the theoretical framework governing the question of the inevitability of wars, specifically wars of annexation and intervention, as an outgrowth of monopoly capitalism and the ceaseless expansion of financial capital to expand its spheres of influence and fields of investment, and the striving for hegemony of imperialist powers. And second one is the current balance of power among the imperialists and the flashpoints, namely the war in Ukraine and the situation in Taiwan, and now there's the third front opening up, in Yemen, the war against the Palestinian people, it's through its proxy Israel, and then U.S. and UK are bombing Yemen. So these are the sort of the current flashpoints, and overall it's a theory conference, and uh, its purpose was to reaffirm Lenin's theory of imperialism as the highest stage of capitalism, as his famous book was titled. And he famously outlined the five different characteristics of the imperialism, and we focused on the last one, which is the territorial division of the whole world among the biggest capitalist powers. So there was one thing that the participants of the conference agreed on, which is that currently, well, so the two parties that I mentioned, they both hold positions that there are multiple imperialist powers today. The China and Russia being the sort of newly emerging imperialist powers, challenging the U.S. hegemony. But they agree, along with other organizations, that the U.S. imperialism is still the most powerful imperialist powers, and it's an obstacle to just peace. Even though we all agreed on this position, there are multiple points of disagreements that I observed at the conference. One is the question around the status of China and Russia. Like, are they imperialist or anti-imperialist? There were divergent positions among the conference participants. One of them saw like the CPP and CPI Maoists, who saw China and Russia as imperialist nations, and the Ukrainian war is an inter-imperialist war. But there are other groups who saw Russia as capitalist but not imperialist, hence as a sort of lesser evil to the US. And Russia's invasion of Ukraine is self-defense and hence justified. So there's a very sharp divide. There's a lot of debate around it. So yeah, that's the sort of first disagreement. The other one is, how should anti-imperialists in the imperialist countries such as US, Canada, and Japan respond to wars? So as we saw in the first disagreement, basically the idea was to, whether um, uh, advance the working class revolution by sort of taking advantage of the divisions among the imperialist powers. That's how sort of revolution succeeded in Russia and China. But the other group thought that, but maybe we should, since China and Russia are anti-imperialist powers, they're basically challenging U.S. hegemony. We should support China and Russia in their fight against US, so that, which I saw as a sort of pro-war position in my opinion. So I'm very sort of skeptical about that. And the third disagreement was that is the new communist international necessary? And why do the Communist Party of the Philippines held a position that right now there's no really like socialist country comparable to the Soviet Union, which hosted the Third International. So and then also they want to prioritize their own national liberation struggles in the Philippines. So there's no need for international body, but other organizations, argue for creating more international coordinating body that's similar to Communist International. Yeah, so these are some of the points of disagreement among the conference participants. They didn't come to a shared conclusion. That the purpose of this conference is mostly to sort of like, exchange views and engage in discussion, honest but camaraderie discussion. So we didn't really come to one shared position, but we had this discussion nonetheless, and at the end, we all sang the International, old or working class anthem from the late 19th century. Became a sort of like the symbol of proletarian internationalism. So that was the conference. I'm basically simplifying a lot just to really, I could basically talking for hours and hours about this. It was such an interesting conference, but yeah, some lessons, an afterthought about this conference. It really, made me, it sort of confirmed the importance of studying theory and history in our social justice work. Like we often, we as a JCSJ held various educational events, but we don't really talk so much of theory. Like we don't really uh, talk about like how capitalism works, or like engage in a specific text of the Marxist theory. I mean, we don't really we're not really a Marxist organization. Like we come from different political backgrounds, but I think it's really important to engage in sort of the rich history of the various revolutionary struggles in the history from around the world, but also like what sort of Jay mentioned earlier. This is the history of the militant working class struggles within the Japanese Canadian community as well. So I think both like study of both theory and in history is very important. And the necessity of building militant anti-imperialist alliance with other communities. We have done some of that, with our work around migrant justice, working with Migrante Ontario and Anakabayan Toronto. And this is the photo from the recent anti-imperialist Hiroshima Day this past August. But yeah, I think we need to do more of that, and really build international solidarity. Reach out to other organizations and oppressed communities, and yeah. And the balance between organizing and mobilizing. So this is a distinction that Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, he's a Black revolutionary from the 60s and 70s, still around. He lives in Ghana now, but he basically drew the distinction between mobilizing, which is like protesting, going to rallies and marches, and organizing, which is sort of building an organization, and having structures in place and sort of like really, have a membership and just a sort of building power, collective power, as an organization. So we obviously need some mobilization. I think these things are both necessary, but we tend to focus more on mobilization than organization. So I think we should maybe focus more on organizing as well. And lastly, this conference was in like second week of October. That was only a week after Alexa fled. So I saw a lot of like I went to this was in Netherlands, and I went to Germany after as well. But there's Palestinian protests happening all over, and actually the second day of the conference, some of the conference participants, because there was a massive rally in downtown Amsterdam, so some of the conference participants sort of split and went to that, formed a contingent and went to the protest instead. So it was present, but we're still trying to figuring out the conference. We had a little bit of discussion about like, should we support Hamas, or is Hamas like fascist, or is it a national liberation movement? So we had that kind of discussion as well. But now it's 3 months into this horrific genocide, and ethnic cleansing, and the Kim and Maya mentioned earlier, there's a huge wave of protests happening almost every day in Toronto as well. So there's a lot we can learn from the current wave of protests and direct actions targeting various arms manufacturers and institutions that are complicit in the genocide. And we're also seeing a lot of repression as well, right? Like the police brutality and criminalizations of Palestine solidarity. So there's a really intensifying contradictions in the belly of the beast here. So I think it's really important for us in the Japanese Canadian community to think about this dynamic of like, you know, struggle and class struggle and the state repression. Yeah, so that's my report back. Thank you so much for listening. This is the photo I took with Louis Halandoni and Connie Ledesma. They're boss members of the NDFP, and actually Louis Halandoni is also listed as a terrorist by the United States and the Philippines. So, but they're, you know, they're just really like they're Tito and Tita. You know, they're really friendly, and I was really honored to meet these two OGs of the Philippine Revolution, and yeah, it was really, I had a really great time there, and I learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to sort of putting what I learned in this conference to practice, and you know, doing more anti-war organizing with the JCSJ. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, Kota. We have a couple more solidarity messages. So I'm gonna pass it back to you, Kota, to introduce those folks.
Okay, so we have 3 messages. One is recorded, and 2 kindly joined us today to deliver their messages in person. The first one is from Miho Kim of the San Francisco Comfort Women Justice Coalition, and Desun Oka from the Nikkei Decolonization Tour. These 2 groups work closely together, so they made one video. So I'm gonna play that. By the way, actually, our member Jun, who couldn't make it today, unfortunately, he participated in the Nikkei Decolonization Tour. So yeah, so we have the connections there. We like to send our members to participate in their trips in the future as well.
Hello, everyone. My name is Miho Kim, and I am a founding member of San Francisco's Comfort Women Justice Coalition. It's a great honor to be able to extend a congratulatory message along with heartfelt solidarity to Japanese Canadians for social justice. As fellow comrades in the struggle for justice for comfort women from San Francisco to Toronto and beyond, we look forward to many more years of advancing justice together for a better tomorrow. Working with Jun and Kota, members of Japanese Canadians for Social Justice, have been a great honor and have really expanded the scope of our activities and strengthened their capacity to elevate our platform, because more work is definitely needed, and there is so much hope to be built together. Thank you, and congratulations again.
Hi everyone, my name is Jason Oka. I was a participant in Nikkei Decolonization Tour. For 2 weeks, we toured all of Japan and visited important sites of memory and visited activists who are on the forefront of Japan's leading social justice issues. We had the pleasure of participating in the tour with Jun, who came on board as a fellow Japanese Canadian and as a war-displaced Japanese Filipino. We had the great pleasure of listening to his insights as a person who comes from this community, and we look forward to working with your organization in the coming years to strengthen solidarity between Japan, the United States, and Canada. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miho and Desen. Our next message is from Leandra of Anakabayan, Toronto.
That's me. Thanks, Coda. Hello, everybody. I'm Leandra, the Educational Officer of Anakbayan Toronto, and we send our warm and militant greetings and congratulations to you, our comrades in Japanese Canadians for Social Justice, on your 7th anniversary since the establishment of your organization in 2017. Anakbayan Toronto is an overseas chapter of Anakbayan Philippines, we are a comprehensive grassroots mass organization of Filipino youth, and we advocate for national freedom and genuine democracy in the Philippines. We are an anti-imperialist organization, and we promote the rights and welfare for Filipinos, both in the Philippines and in the diaspora. So we kind of operate in a similar role for Filipinos that y'all do for Japanese folks. And our similarities, another point of unity that we have is that we uphold international solidarity work, not only advocating for our own peoples, but for those who struggle for freedom and liberation against colonization, imperialism, and state fascism across the world. We've worked side by side over the years in carrying our important tasks in exposing and opposing imperialism, oppression, and exploitation. In 2020, we organized a rally together in front of the Japanese consulate to support Pat, a trans Filipino woman that was detained by Japanese immigration authorities. And through this mobilization and the larger Free Pat campaign, we together condemned and exposed the Japanese authorities' transphobic, violent, and repressive acts that they subjected Pat to during her imprisonment. And our collective organizing put pressure on the Japanese government, which eventually led to her provisional release. In 2023, we participated in the No Blood Money Walk on Hiroshima Day, organized by ILPS. We marched through the financial district in Toronto and called out the banks and financial institutions for their oppression of the working class and their role in the imperialist wars around the world. And with the intensified social and political crisis under imperialism and within the imperial core, we commend JCSJ's unwavering commitment to continue organizing around the issues not only of Japanese Canadians, but also of Indigenous peoples in Turtle Island and other exploited and oppressed groups. We at Anak Bayan Toronto are grateful for your comradeship and solidarity. Together, let us carry forward our anti-colonial struggle and continue to expose colonialism and imperialism, and let us continue to arouse, organize, and mobilize the masses towards a progressive future. Padayon, ang tao, ang bayan, nayon ay lumalaban. The people united will never be defeated. Onwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Leandra. Our next message is from Min of International League of People Struggle Canada, ILPS Canada.
Hi, everyone. My name is Min. The International League of People Struggle in Canada congratulates Japanese Canadians for social justice on the anniversary of your 7th year of organizing, arousing, and mobilizing Japanese Canadians with a strong stand for social justice, human rights, and anti-imperialist consciousness. Imperialism remains the primary contradiction in the world system today. Japan has historically been a major imperialist power, guilty of numerous war crimes from the Second Sino-Japanese War to its role in World War II and its occupation of the Philippines. Japan was able to recover from the ruins of World War II and become an economic superpower under the tutelage of US imperialism, which has used Japan and Okinawa as its launch pads for the wars of aggression in Korea and Vietnam. War was technically outlawed in Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution following World War II, but since 2014, that has been amended to allow for self-defense as well as military action if its allies are attacked. This year, we are seeing a drastic upsurge in Japanese defense budget spending as the first year in a 5-year plan, which will see an overall 56% increase in spending from approximately 27.47 trillion yen in the last 5 years to 43 trillion in the next 5. Japan and its citizens are paying to fall in line behind the US's Indo-Pacific strategy, not just with money, but soon with blood as well. The weapons industry is clearly an anti-people industry, feeding off and profiting from the exploitation and oppression of the working class and oppressed peoples under capitalism. Similarly, the arms race is a global competition for imperialist super profit through the export of capital and colonization of global peripheries. Imperialism is the reproduction of capitalist competition on a larger scale, and war is the inevitable result of this competition. Japan is also a key member of the G7, one of the most powerful capitalist forces composed of the world's most powerful imperial nations. The G7 member states are central to supporting Israel's 100-day genocide against Gaza, with Japan refusing to take a clear stance against this genocide while condemning and attempting to sanction Palestinian resistance. JCSJ plays an important role today in holding Japan accountable to its past and advocating for a just and anti-imperialist future. As a group founded to support Bill 79 to commemorate the Nanjing Massacre, JCSJ has, from the forefront, been essential in building community support for human rights and social justice, as well as working in solidarity with other anti-imperialist organizations. This remains true today with your commitment to standing with the Palestinian people, with indigenous land defenders, and anti-imperialist struggles all over the world. We're excited to see JCSJ enter your 7th year of organizing and hope for future collaboration in broadening the global anti-imperialist work alongside ILPS. Long live international solidarity.
Right on. Thank you so much, Ming. Long live international solidarity. We have one comment in the chat that I'd like to read out from Fatima and Andy. Fatima is sorry, there's someone coming in the waiting room. Fatima is based in Montreal, working with Pinay Quebec organization for Filipino workers, and Andy is also a comrade of mine. They was the friends of the Filipino people in struggle. They said, Fatima says, I was in Thailand, November 2023 for the Migrante International Congress. Migrante Japan was there and shared about the work that was done for the Free Patochan campaign. The campaign would not have been possible without the efforts of JCSJ. Solidarity to JCSJ on your anniversary and onwards to many more years. Thank you so much, Fatima and Andy. And thank you also to Roger from Migrante International, who we also worked very closely for this campaign, the international campaign in Japan and in Canada.